I believe that 21st century economics is going to be practiced first and theorized later. So having written Doughnut economics and presented it for 2 years and talking ideas, it became obvious, let's move from ideas to practice. Where are the people who actually want to do this? And I am going to share my slides, and I am going to talk about Amsterdam and then some. So just to kick off, here's the Doughnut. It's a Goldilocks zone, as Stewart was mentioning. It's a dashboard. The aim is to leave no one falling short in the hole in the middle without the essentials of life, without overshooting Earth's life supporting systems. And this is at the global scale. So we are drawing on the Sustainable Development Goals to define what it means for every person to meet the essentials of life. And the outside is defined by the planetary boundaries of Earth system science. If that's the goal, we are way from it now. All of the red shows the shortfall of humanity and the overshoot on our planet. And to me, this is our 21st century selfie. It's an image that last century's economists and politicians and business leaders and communities leaders did not see. And I fully believe that the brilliant Simon Kuznets, were he alive today, would say, I am drawing up a new indicator and dashboard of indicators for that, because this is the challenge of our times, not the 1930s challenge he was presented with. So how do we get into the Doughnut? Let's bring it down to the scale that policymaking actually happens. And I'm going to talk about cities because we all are aware there's a lot of dynamism happening within our cities these days. Sometimes can move faster than nations can move, but what I'm going to present can absolutely be done at the village, neighborhood, city, or indeed national level. So we've downscaled the Doughnut in Portland, Amsterdam, and Philadelphia. And the critical question that we invite you to, and I invite you now to think of it around a city that you care about or love or live in. Here's the question: how can our city be a home to thriving people in this thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? So it breaks into 4 questions. What would it mean for the people of this city to thrive? How should that be answered? That is answered by the people of the city, whether it's through the city's existing targets that is drawn up through a democratic process or through a citizens' assembly or through discussion groups. What do the people think thriving means? And that's going to differ. There's of course deep commonalities across human society, and there are differences of culture, of history, of values in different places. So let that be representative of a place. Then we ask, what would it mean for this city to thrive within its natural habitat? Where is this city on planet Earth? Which ecosystem is it part of? What is nature's genius here? How does nature sequester carbon and store groundwater and house biodiversity and cool the climate here? And how could our city aim to match or exceed the generosity of the wildland next door? And this is biomimicry. Now, together, those two give us fabulous local aspiration. Let's be an amazing place to live within nature. But the 21st century realization is, of course, that all cities are embedded in the web of the world, and therefore we need a global responsibility. So how do we also make sure our city respects the health of the whole planet? All the food and the clothing and the electronics and the construction materials that are imported have a massive ecological water materials footprint on the world, and that must come back within that city's share of boundaries. And we started in these high-income cities because all high-income cities have massively excessive ecological footprints and must transform and come back within those. And let's think also about people. The people at the end of those global supply chains making the food and the clothing and the electronics and the materials that we depend upon. What are the conditions of work and life for them? And how do we ensure that we procure and purchase in ways that respect their well-being? So these are the 4 lenses that make up a city portrait. This is what it looks like, the one we made for Amsterdam. All the dark gray are the city's existing targets or global targets, and then all the light gray boxes are statistics. And it gives you a mirror, a snapshot of the city against its desired performance. Then it really comes to life when we layer onto it the deep interconnections between all of these lenses. Cities where there's very little tree coverage. In summer, those neighborhoods get much hotter, and the kids in schools in those neighborhoods, it's absolutely proven that they cannot retain information and learn as well when they're in hot classrooms. So there are very clear connections between tree coverage and low-income neighborhood outcomes, and there's a racial identity to this as well. It's all interconnected. So we show the connections, we map onto it existing local initiatives, whether it's about transforming food or transport or energy or housing or racial inequality. Show the values that people hold dear in this place. What is the values that will carry us and enable us to pivot from where we've been to where we want to go? map onto it quotes and stories of lived experience of life in this city, and then use it to flag up new initiatives that if we did an intervention here, it could have transformative impacts across multiple dimensions. This is what it's looked like when we've done these kinds of workshops in Portland, Philadelphia, and Amsterdam. These are policymakers from the city staff and community members. And what was very clear that people came, were delighted that their issue, whether it was tree coverage or sewage or racial equality or education, they were on the map. They could see themselves there and they could see everybody else and start drawing the deep interconnections. And these policymakers were so clearly ready to come up with a holistic way of transforming their cities. For me, the really exciting thing, though, is that peer-to-peer inspiration. So Amsterdam, we produced this report actually ready at the end of December, but they launched it in April in the middle of COVID, as they said, as Caroline quoting Marika van Doornik, this is more relevant than ever because all crises show us that everything is interconnected. They came out in April. Within 2 months, Copenhagen was inspired by what they'd done and passed a motion in the Copenhagen City Council, 50 votes for and 4 votes against. So over 90% support to say, let's draw up a plan for the city of Copenhagen on what would it look like for us to become a donut city. And there's a very interesting story of the coalition building that went on behind the scenes. I'd like to share a video that's going to go on our platform of the young woman who, city member from the Alternative Party, who talked about how they built that coalition and how they made all political parties see that this was in their interest to support. Since then, we've got the city of Cali in Colombia have independently just drawn up their own donut for transforming their city. The nation of Costa Rica have a plan for Regenerate Costa Rica. They're using the donut as the frame. I'm going to place my bet that within a decade, they're going to rename themselves Costa Regenerica because they're aiming to be one of the world's first regenerative nations. In Cornwall, they've created a downscale donut as a policy decision tool. So they're coming up with a new policy and they're checking it against the social and ecological boundaries. And in Curacao, in the Dutch Caribbean, they've started an initiative there. So the letter C is getting a real head start here. I'm glad to add to it the letter B. Barcelona have just decided they're going to drop a city donut. In Birmingham, one of the most underserved neighborhoods of Ladywood's got brilliant change makers leading work there. And I've just come off a call from the city of Berlin right now where they're also planning it. So A, B, and C are doing really well. Let's not leave it till we get to the end of the alphabet for the United Kingdom to get on board with this. My last slide is to say that we're launching Doughnut Economics Action Lab in September. It's a place for anybody to come who wants to use these tools and ideas in communities, in cities, in places, in educational research, business or enterprise, in government or policy making. We profoundly believe that it's the ideas of the crowd and the ingenuity of what the crowd will do that will transform this. So I invite everybody here to join and help us turn this into a paradigm change that we already knew we wanted.